Hello and welcome, my budding theologians. This is Joel Willoughby, founder of Brains and Bibles. I have another high-quality morsel of theology here for you today, and this is part 3, so make sure you watch part 1 and 2, and of course, I know you have already, but this is part 3 of how do we get so many Bible translations? That's a valid question, starting all the way back to from the first century with the apostles and everything, and moving forward to these hundreds of English translations today. There's some languages that don't have any translations at all in them, and yet English has hundreds, right? So there's a big question mark there. I've given several reasons as to why, at least a couple reasons why there's so many different translations, like translation philosophy, word for word, thought for thought, that kind of thing. If you need to brush up on that, go back to part 2. And then the last one I mentioned, which I didn't really start, was money. The biggest reason is money, and I do think that is true. Sad, but true. So copyrights. This is how a lot of people make money, right? Through copyrights. There are a few that do not have copyrights. Bible translations here. There's the Web, which is the World English Bible, and then you have the ASV, the American Standard Version of 1901. They also don't have a copyright. And then one more, that's the NET, the New English Translation. None of those three have copyrights whatsoever. I have heard a lot that the King James Version does not have a copyright. But that's actually not true. They've had a copyright since their first publication, and they still have one in the United Kingdom. So not completely true there. With that being said, though, a copyright does not mean greedy. That's not equivalent, okay? Not necessarily. There's good reason to have a copyright, and it doesn't have to be greed. Modern translations even, a lot of them have a fair use clause in their copyright statements, meaning that there is a limited use of the text being allowed without special permission from the publisher. So that's not so bad. These publishers need to be paid for their work as well, not just the publishers. You have all the scholars and laborers. All together, there's thousands of hours of work being represented here with each translation. And so they need to get paid, and some of this money will go into even future translation work. There is a good reason to have all these translations. As languages morph, you want to make sure you have something current, as the Bible has always been in the common language, in the common tongue. And so you want the common person to be able to understand it. So that's valuable. And just trying to make sure there is high quality academic work in our Bible translations. So there's still a plethora of these English translations, and I don't think all of them have the most noble of intentions, and so I do think there is some greed involved there at some point. It is profitable. So this comes from the sales from the individual customers, including churches and schools. It arises from the publisher not having to pay royalties to other publishers for using their translation. And so there's definitely some money there. Now, here's the big thing, the last thing. How do we pick a Bible today? After all that's being said, how do we pick a Bible today? That's a good question, right? So first we have to consider the advantages of only one translation. So is it best to have just one translation, or is it best to have multiple translations? I would say there's even an advantage to having the one same exact Bible. There's very good reason for that. There's even differences in the same exact translation, as there's been revisions throughout history for a lot of these translations. And so sometimes I'll be reading from one, and like the ESV, and then there's someone else that has an ESV, but it's newer than mine. And so once in a while, there'll be a word difference there. And they're thinking, well, what translation are you using? We're actually using the same, but there's a different revision going on there. So if you have the same exact Bible for your whole lifetime, you get it rebound and things, use the same exact one your whole lifetime, then you will be able to find stuff so much easily. You can just go open up that Bible, give a good feel for where that 1 Timothy's at, or Ezekiel, or something like that, and you'll even think to yourself, I know that what I'm looking for is on the left side, the top of the page, somewhere back in here. Oh, there it is. You might even have it underlined or something. That's a whole other thing. Is it okay to write in the Bible, write little notes, underline, highlight, maybe? I love it. I do it all the time. It helps me learn. I just think it's important to pick and choose what you will underline, what you will notate. You don't want to overdo it. if everything has highlighter, then it's like nothing's highlighted, right? So you want to make sure that you are a little picky. What I tend to do is when I get another Bible, I will think through, what am I going to focus on in this Bible? Am I going to be very technical? Is it going to be more linguistic focused, more doctrinal? Will it be more of a relationship focus? What is it going to be? And even people will use different colors for different things, like prophecy or doctrine or something like that. But what I hate about that is there's sometimes the lines get a little fuzzy, and it's like, well, this needs to be red, yellow, and purple. What am I going to do here? And I'm not so artistic to know what kind of colors mix up to be and things. I don't know. Anyways, there are many advantages to only one translation. So with one translation, you'll be able to find references faster. You'll be able to memorize more easily because you're always having the same words, right? It creates a common lingo within a church body if you have even the whole church body, like a local church, using the same translation. I think that helps a lot too. A lot better communication that way. Sometimes someone will just kind of paraphrase some scripture, and someone else won't really recognize that. But if everyone's using the same translation, you might just be able to do it and have a better communication there. There helps to clear some confusion when a church chooses a translation to unify with. You never have to worry about it. A lot of people have phones and stuff, tablets anyways. You can just kind of pick any translation and follow along that way. But I don't really like using the electronic means, especially because of notifications and things. You'll get distracted a lot easier. All of a sudden a text or an email or some kind of alert comes on your electronic device, whatever you're going to use. Then you could get distracted. So I always like to use the paper, the real stuff, the paper stuff. I always choose that. So reading multiple translations, though. Multiple translations can be helpful in other ways. And so you can make your mind notice the differences. So you'll be reading one for a while, and you go to another translation. You'll think, wow, that's a bit different than what I'm used to. Why is it different? And you can begin to check that out, and it causes you to study. It makes you think about it. Sometimes if you use the same translation so often, your mind won't engage with certain things because you just hear it so often, it's familiar, you won't really think about it. But if you see a difference in the translation, you'll think, why is that different? Which one's better than the other? Is one right, one wrong? And so you'll think about that. And so it causes you to study more and have a greater understanding of the language. So reading thought-for-thought translations can be like reading a commentary as well. So maybe you'll have more of a word-for-word translation for your deep study, and just maybe to read through. But then you'll also go to a thought-for-thought kind of translation and treat it more like a commentary and run through it a little fast and think about, wow, why would they say that? Is that really what that means? And kind of dig a little bit deeper into it. That's kind of interesting. So you might have a little bit more of a broader spectrum of understanding of what certain words mean, and then you can decide for yourself what would probably work best due to context and doctrine and things like that. So now, consider which translation philosophy is best for you, as I've mentioned both already. So formal equivalency, let me remind you about that. That's the word-for-word translation. And this is best in reflecting the original writings. I like it best. It's what I prefer. It may require more study to truly understand, but that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. And I think, the text is very important to stay true to. Sometimes, if there's a masculine pronoun, even, is it okay to say whoever, or do you say, you keep the he or something like that? Some people get a little more picky than others. You can decide. I'm not going to really comment on that. So there's a word for word. How much do you want to be just like the original text? If it's still accurate, is it okay to not be exactly like the original text? There's even some languages that do not have the gender in their pronouns. And so, it's different. It's different for different languages as well. There's dynamic equivalency. This is the thought-for-thought style. So remember, this style is necessary at times. Even with the formal equivalency, word for word, you're always going to have somewhere where you have to have thought-for-thought. Maybe because of a cultural transfer, just doesn't work. Something like that. And so there's always reason for it, but how much do you allow? That's a difference. That's why there's so many translations. Different people have different ideas about that. So this is best for just making the reading simple, though, for a quick reading, sit down and go through a whole book at a time, that kind of thing. This simplicity can sacrifice many of the nuances of the original text, perhaps. This is a good translation for long reading, while formal equivalency is best for teaching, preaching, and studying. Of course, that is my personal opinion. The next thing to consider is text family, or text type, you might call it. This is perhaps the most difficult because you would need to study the original languages and such for many years, deep study, to really get a grasp of the issues that are present there, and paleography and all, the study of why they choose certain readings, people choose certain readings and things like that, what kind of things scribes do when they make copies. And then, of course, you have to take in consideration all the unprofessional scribes and what they've done, and kind of review the first couple parts of this series to see some of those things again. So, but then all of a sudden, the argument kind of gets simplified for you as a common lay person, perhaps, because although the arguments seem very complex, which text type, which text family is best, I don't know. I just don't know. You're starting to worry about it until you realize that the King James Version and the New King James Version are the only ones that don't use the critical text type, or text family. And so then it's kind of easy because you only have two translations over here, which the King James Version is tied in with the one of the Textus Receptus publications, and then you have the New King James Version, which is not directly from, or not only from, the majority text, but it is mostly, it's very close, it's the closest one to it. And then all the rest are from the critical text. So that makes it easier, actually. So then there's Bibles with multiple translations as well. This is kind of cool. I don't know if you know about these or not. There's the interlinear Bibles and the parallel Bibles, and then I'll tell you about something else. So the interlinear Bibles, these will have the English translation with the Greek and the Hebrew right underneath it, and they'll have like the little numbers that'll say, "Hey, look at this number," and you'll see all these. It'll take you to a lexicon. Lexicon is just a fancy word for dictionary, and it'll show you all these possibilities of what that word means. The thing you have to be careful about with that is when you use like a Strong's concordance or something like that, or whatever you might want to use. You have to be careful because it'll show you all this range of meaning. The problem is that is all the range of meaning for all the different kind of contexts this word can be in, and so you can't just pick and choose whichever word you think is best. It's not that simple. It's not that simple, especially with Hebrew. Lots of fluidity there. So you have to guard yourself against that and really do some good study to figure out which word is the best identification of that particular context. Okay, so I guess the downside here is that you'll not be able to find every translation in one of these interlinear Bibles, but you can see what's out there. Then you have the parallel Bibles. Now the parallel Bibles, they'll have multiple translations side by side, which is really helpful. And you can just kind of quick review right on the same page, multiple translations. This comes in a big variety, including, of course, different translations and number of translations. So some just have, maybe a couple, whereas some have like 5 or 6. Those are really thick. There's also harmonies of the Gospels. A harmony of the Gospel is, of course, just the 4 books, right? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But whenever they're talking about the same event, it'll have them side by side. So it might just be one gospel. Like John is very unique compared to the other 3, right? But then, Matthew and Mark, they're very similar, and Luke's very similar too. And so you can see them all side by side. And so you can see those little nuanced differences between those different perspectives of the gospel. That's really cool. So not a whole translation, but something really neat. It's a real gem. It's a real gem. Of course, limited translations there, and so you just take whatever's out there. But really, you need one. It doesn't matter what translations it's in. I mean, you just need it because it'll at least help you very easily see what matches up. And of course, some scholars would maybe disagree on what exactly is referring to the same event. That's not too often. It's just a couple little places, and so that's not a big deal. Then the other thing I have to mention before I wrap up this series is the Message. Because some people get that confused. The Message is not actually a translation. It's just a paraphrase. It's just meant for little children before they go to bed to kind of have something biblical-ish. It's like the VeggieTales version of the Bible. And so don't use it for study or anything. If you were to use it, I would just use it if like you're going to happen to read some sort of fictional novel, and then you go, well, you know what? I'll read the Message instead. But make sure you're actually reading the Bible. That's important. Every day, read the Bible. And more than once. Just 5-10 minutes of the Bible in a 24-hour day is not quite enough. You need more than that, especially in the world we live in today. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the series. How do we get so many English translations here, right? That's a big question. And there's so much more I could say. If you are interested in anything particular, please let me know, and I'll see if I can help you out the best I can with that. It's a big study, but I enjoy it, and you deserve to know. So please ask me if you have any concerns there at all. Thank you for listening. I look forward to having you join me for the next morsel of high-quality theology.